Cinderella. Cinderella, the daughter of a wealthy man, became ill and feeling her death approaching, called her daughter to her side. She told her to be good and pious, and she would always be protected by God and watched over from heaven. After she closed her eyes, the girl went to her mother's grave every day and wept, remaining good and pious. When winter came, snow covered the grave, but when spring arrived, the man took another wife. She brought 2 daughters with her, who were beautiful but wicked. The new stepmother and her daughters began to mistreat the stepchild, taking away her pretty clothes and giving her old, gray ones. They also forced her to work in the kitchen. To the young girl they said, "He who wants to eat must earn it." They made her wear old wooden shoes and a gray dress. "Just look at the proud princess, how decked out she is." They cried and laughed, and led her into the kitchen, where she had to do hard work from morning till night. Get up before daybreak, carry water, light fires, cook, and wash. Besides this, the sisters did every imaginable injury to her. They mocked her and emptied her pea and lentil into the ashes, so that she was forced to pick them out again in the evening, when she had worked until she was weary. She had no bed to go to, but had to sleep by the fireside in the ashes. As a result, she always looked dusty and dirty. They called her Cinderella, fireside in the ashes. As a result, she always looked dusty and dirty. They called her Cinderella. It happened that the father was going to the fair. He asked his 2 stepdaughters what they wanted him to bring back for them. "Beautiful dresses," said one. "Pearls and jewels," said the second. And Cinderella said, "Father, break off the first branch that knocks against your hat on your way home for me." So the father bought beautiful dresses, pearls, and jewels for his 2 stepdaughters. On his way home, as he was riding through a green thicket, a hazel branch brushed against him and knocked off his hat. He then broke off the branch and brought it with him. When he reached home, he gave his stepdaughters the things they had wished for. To Cinderella, he gave the hazel branch. Cinderella thanked him and went to her mother's grave, where she planted the branch. She watered it with her tears, and it grew into a beautiful tree. 3 times a day Cinderella would go and sit beneath it and weep and pray. A little white bird would always come to the tree, and if Cinderella wished for something, the bird would throw it down to her. However, the king had announced a festival that would last 3 days, and all the beautiful young women in the kingdom were invited. They were invited so that their son could choose a bride. When the 2 stepsisters heard that they were also to be among the candidates, they were delighted. They called Cinderella and asked her to brush their hair and fasten their buckles, as they were going to the festival in the king's palace. Cinderella did as she was told, but she was sad because she also wanted to go to the dance. She begged her stepmother to let her go. The stepmother said that she was too dirty and had no clothes or shoes, and she should not go to the festival. However, Cinderella continued to ask, and finally her stepmother agreed. If she picked out a dish of lentils from the ashes in 2 hours, she could go with them. The maiden went out the back door and called to the birds, asking them to help her pick out the good lentils and put them in a pot. The bad lentils were put in a crop. Then 2 white pigeons flew in through the kitchen window, followed by the turtle doves, and finally all the birds beneath the sky came whirring and crowding in. They were delighted amongst the ashes, and the pigeons nodded their heads and began to pick, pick, pick. The rest also began to pick, and gathered all the good grains into a dish. Hardly had 1 hour passed before they had finished, and all flew out again. Then the girl took the dish to her stepmother, and was happy, believing that now she would be allowed to go to the festival with them. However, the stepmother said, "Cinderella, you have no clothes and you can't dance. You would only be laughed at." As Cinderella wept, the stepmother said, "If you can pick 2 dishes of lentils out of the ashes in 1 hour, you shall go with us." She thought to herself, "I most certainly cannot do this." When the stepmother emptied the 2 dishes of lentils among the ashes, the maiden went through the back door into the garden and saw the tame pigeons and turtle doves and all the birds under heaven. She asked them to help her pick the good seeds into a pot and the bad seeds into the crop. 2 white pigeons flew in through the kitchen window, followed by the turtle doves. Soon all the birds from the sky arrived, whirring and crowding in. They settled amongst the ashes, and the doves began to pick, nodding their heads. The others joined in, gathering all the good seeds in the dishes. Before half an hour had passed, they had finished, and all flew back out again. The maiden carried the dishes to her stepmother, delighted, believing that she could now go to the festival with them. But her stepmother said, "All this will not help you. You cannot go with us, for you have no clothes and can't dance. We would be ashamed of you." She turned her back and left. Cinderella hurried away with her 2 proud daughters, as no one was at home. She went to her mother's gravesite beneath the hazel tree and wept, shivering and quivering. The little tree shook, and silver and gold coins fell down on her. Then a bird threw a golden and silver dress down to her, and embroidered slippers with silk and silver. She put on the dress in all haste, and went to the festival. Her stepsisters and stepmother did not recognize her, thinking she must be a foreign princess, for she looked so beautiful in the golden dress. They never once thought of Cinderella, and believed she was sitting at home picking lentils out of the ashes. The prince went to meet her, took her by the hand, and danced with her. He would dance with no other maidens, and never let go of her hand, and if anyone else approached to invite her, he said, "This is my partner." They danced till evening, and then she wished to go home. But the king's son said, "I will go with you and keep you company, for I want to see who the beautiful maiden belongs to." She escaped from him, however, and jumped into the pigeon house. The king's son waited for her father to come, and then he told him that the strange maiden had jumped into the pigeon house. The old man thought, could it be Cinderella? They had to bring an axe and pickaxe so he could break the pigeon house apart, but no one was there. When they returned home, Cinderella was lying in her dirty clothes among the ashes with a dim little lamp burning on the mantelpiece. Cinderella had quickly jumped down from the pigeon's back and run to a little hazel tree. She had taken off her beautiful clothes and left them on the ground. A bird had taken them away, and she had then placed herself among the ashes in the kitchen in her gray gown. The next day, when the festival started again, she returned to the palace as a beautiful princess, and her parents and stepsisters had left. Cinderella went to the hazel tree and said, "Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold, throw down upon me." And then the bird dropped down a much more beautiful dress than the day before. When Cinderella appeared in the festival in this dress, everyone was amazed at her beauty. The king's son waited until she arrived, and instantly took her hand and danced with her alone. When others approached and invited her, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, she wished to leave, and the king's son followed her, wanting to see which house she entered. But she darted away from him into the garden, where a beautiful tall tree stood with the most magnificent pear. She climbed so nimbly among the branches like a squirrel, and the king's son could not tell where she had gone. He waited until her father arrived and asked him. The stranger maiden had escaped from me, and I believe she had climbed up the pear tree, which the father thought could not be climbed. Could it be Cinderella? And had an axe been brought and the tree cut down, but no one had been on it, and when they got into the kitchen, Cinderella was lying there amongst the ashes as usual, for she had jumped down on the other side of the tree and taken the beautiful dress off the bird on the little hazel tree and put on her gray gown. On the third day, when the parents and sisters had gone away, Cinderella went once more to her mother's grave and said to the little tree, "Shiver and quiver, my little tree, silver and gold, throw down over me." And now the bird had thrown down to her address, which was more splendid and magnificent than any she had yet seen, and the slippers were golden. When she went to the festival in the dress, no one knew what to say for astonishment. The king's son danced with her, and if anyone invited her to dance, he said, "She is my partner." When evening came, Cinderella wanted to leave, and the king's son wanted to go with her. She escaped from him quickly, but he used a trick and caused the staircase to be covered in pitch. When she ran down, the slipper she left behind got stuck. The king's son picked it up. It was small and golden. The next morning he took it to his father and said that no one would be his wife except the woman whose foot fits the slipper. The two sisters were happy, as they had pretty feet. The eldest sister tried the shoe on, but it was too small. Her mother gave her a knife to cut her toe off so she could become queen. The maiden cut her toe off and forced the shoe on. The prince put his foot into the shoe, swallowed the pain, and went to the king's son. He took her on his horse as his bride and rode away with her. However, they were obliged to pass a grave where two pigeons were sitting on a hazel tree and crying. The prince turned and looked at the girl's foot and saw blood streaming from it. He turned his horse around and brought the false bride back home, saying that she was not the true one. The other sister then put the shoe on. She went into her chamber and tried to get her toes into the shoe, but her heel was too large. Her mother gave her a knife and told her to cut a bit off her heel. When she became queen, she would no longer need to walk on foot. The maiden did as her mother said and forced her foot into the shoe. She swallowed the pain and continued to the king's son. He took her on his horse as his bride and rode away with her. But when they passed by a hazel tree, two little pigeons were sitting on it, crying, "Turn and peep, turn and peep. There's blood in the shoe. The shoe is too small for her. The true bride waits for you." He looked down at her foot and saw how blood was running out of her shoe, staining her white stocking. He turned his horse around and took the false bride home again. "This also is not the right one," he said. "Have you no other daughter?" The man asked. The mother replied that there is still a little kitchen wench, which her late wife left behind, but she cannot possibly be the bride. The king's son wanted to send her up to him, but the mother said she was too dirty and could not show herself. The king insisted, so Cinderella was called. She first washed her hands and face clean, then went and bowed down before the king's son, who had given her the golden slipper. She sat on a stool and drew her foot out of the heavy wooden shoe, putting it into the slipper, which fit like a glove. When she stood up, the king's son saw her face and recognized the beautiful maiden who had danced with him. He cried out that she was the true bride. The stepmother and her 2 sisters were terrified and turned pale with rage. However, he took Cinderella on his horse and rode away with her. As they passed a hazel tree, 2 white doves cried out, turn and peep, no blood is in the slipper. The slipper is not too small for her. The true bride rides with you." When they had cried this, the 2 doves flew down and perched on Cinderella's shoulders, one on the right and one on the left, and remained there. When the wedding with the king's son was to be celebrated, the false sisters came and wanted to gain Cinderella's favor and share in her good fortune. When the betrothed couple went to church, the elder was on the right and the younger on the left. As they returned, the pigeons pecked out one of each of their eyes. Afterwards they came back again, and the pigeons pecked out the other eye. Thus, for their wickedness and falsehood, they were punished with blindness for as long as they lived.